Hello, and welcome to Reclamation, an NWM initiative. I am Naomi, and you are about to listen to an interview with a dear friend of mine from childhood, Elizabeth. I listened through this before releasing it to you, with the plan to pull a few quotes from it. At the end of listening, I had pulled 12, and I had been selective. Maybe this is partially because it resonates with me on the deepest and most personal level, but I know it's mostly because Elizabeth shares the mess and the tension between the deception, the devastation, and the redemption of religious abuse so beautifully. Her narrative is profound, and she generously shares it boldly with us in her hope to educate and to bring healing to others. I want to mention that all of our guests take risks by recording these episodes with us. They take risks by shining the light on the problems and the areas of darkness in their experiences. I'm sharing this with you today with gratitude for their perseverance and their audacity. During this interview, the interviewee shared her personal story, which includes her belief about harmful or even criminal behavior of someone in her life. NWM is not in any position to verify the accuracy of any allegations made, and therefore neither endorses nor embraces opinions of its guests as its own. Our goal is to provide the platform for personal stories to be shared in the hopes that they may help others. This episode contains mature sexual content. Listener discretion is advised. And truly, discretion is always advised for this podcast in general. The content of these episodes is hard.
As someone who was born and raised in a cult, how would you summarize your experience? And I'm saying, like, looking back throughout the years, how do you see that time frame of your life?
From childhood to adulthood?
Yeah. So till about, what, 30?
Yes. About? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my early 30s. So childhood was grand. I mean, we had communal living. So, we had lots of children. We had a lot of cookouts and play dates, and we were all taken out of school at the same time and homeschooled together and went on vacations together. So I have fond memories. And then as I matured and instinctively started to know that something was not right, something was off. Growing up in it, seeing this as you're growing up, you don't question it. It's your life. It's what it is. Yeah. But then you start noticing that your life is different than others. You see things, and then you question why your parents are so secretive. Why don't they talk about this? Why are they asking us to be quiet about it? Don't bring it up in front of family members. And so you start questioning, and something's wrong. And then you start to realize. Then I started to realize that there was abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse going on. Poverty, I guess, was, we all kind of lived impoverished. And I think, if you want me to get into, that was preyed upon.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Okay, so I feel like the leader was able to take this class of people and prey upon their wanting to be accepted. And I never saw myself as poor. I didn't even think I was in our group. I thought I was one of the richer ones.
I thought you were too. Were you not?
No, we were, no.
Oh, that's
no.
So funny.
Yeah. No, so, you saw these that they were pretty impoverished. I mean, they lived, pretty poor. And so for somebody to come in and give them promises, they latched on to that. And so seeing that, and then there was a period of rebellion, right? So, my teenage years, went out, did my own thing, partied, never really committed, but always believed that William Branham was a prophet or was our Christ, right? And
then my dad was the
prophet, yeah. And so there were some things that had happened in my life. I got pretty ill at one point, and it was always said that, God will put you on your back to look up. So I thought, okay, well, I need to get back to God, and this was my my avenue, my way back. And so I started going back to the Bible studies. I had met someone, and so I was, sharing with him, and we were going to start a family, have children. So that's what you do, And
yeah, if I can jump in for a
go
second,
ahead.
it was we left the group, but there was this perception of, and I don't want to project this on you, but I think you're going to agree with this. There's this perception of, well, we need them to at least be open to our belief system, though, or we're not going to be able to move forward, or we don't want that to happen. Like, I'm in love with this person, so there has to be an opportunity for him to join. So I'm like sweating that out,
Exactly.
Please don't think we're crazy. Please be open to this being true.
And thankfully he was. He was open to it. He didn't come from a Christian background, and he's just like, okay, it is what it is. Because I told him, I was up front with him, some of the practices that were going on. And so he, loving me, went to these Bible studies, and, we just started then surrounding ourselves with the individuals in the message and spending more time with them. And, we got pretty deep in it. We committed. And then do we want to go into then the catalyst of...
I'll hold off on that.
Okay.
I'll ask you a couple more questions about that time frame first to give a little more context to it.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back, what do you believe were the main tenets of the group's belief system? How would you define it? If you were to be like, okay, these were the top 3 or 4 or 5, whatever pillars of the faith.
Right. William Branham was the center of our faith. He was our Christ figure. We had to go beyond the cross. So they separated Jesus, the human, from the Christ, that light that abode with him. And so now that light was with William Branham, and he was the voice of God to this generation. So even beyond that, though, we had a prophet. I call it a fundamentalist group. So they broke off from the Branham churches and now had their own ideas. What would you say, dogmas?
Right. We added to it. So
even,
And the way I've described it is we added to it to the degree that my dad, the prophet you're referring to, his first wife, who is still in a Branham church today, left him because his beliefs were too radically different from a traditional Branham church for her to stay with him. And so it was different enough, which I think helps listeners have context of, well, okay, it wasn't totally similar. There was enough that was going on there.
Yes. So from that, what separated him from the church was that he was going around to the different Branham churches, preaching that we were spiritual Israel. And so there was a group that then left the church and went to follow Philip. So that would have been one. We were spiritual Israel. Israel, the natural Israel was a decoy. So those would have been...
What would you say were like the main tenets, might be the wrong word, but the main tenets of the culture in the group? When you look back, you're like, these were big cultural things. I think one you mentioned already would be a sense of community. Like, this is my group, this is who we're hanging out with, these are... And I know you did have, you had great friends who weren't in the group as well, so you had a mix. But this was primary community. What would you say about other cultural aspects?
So we were chastised for spending too much time with a natural family, friends that weren't believers. Actually, didn't have too many friends that weren't believers. I remember specifically someone getting yelled at in a study for traveling to go visit their family. So then, we became, half of my family is in it, but half is not. So we became separate. We started, there's a word for it that I can't find.
Like estranged?
Estranged, thank you. So we became estranged from my father's side of the family. I think my grandmother had threatened my father at some point because of she got drift of older men going after younger girls. So yeah, she was worried about us. So she had threatened. So, I mean, they cut that relationship off then.
That's so sad for someone to care and to have your best interest and to be told, no, you don't have access anymore at all.
Right. He believed he was protecting her as well. So she was saying negative things about the prophet, about their beliefs. And he thought, well, if I stop it here, I can protect her from, possibly death, getting disease, something tragic happening in her life because she went against God.
Right. Yeah. And it really was viewed that if someone spoke out against my dad, being viewed as the prophet, then they were blaspheming the Lord. And scripture is very clear that blaspheming the Lord is very serious and it's dealt with very seriously. And so there was this idea of we're going to protect the people we love by cutting them off because they don't agree and we don't want them to be saying bad things. So we're going to hopefully eliminate that possibility. So there was this interesting twist to it of this is a loving gesture. Just so interesting.
That's how they justified it.
And I think many genuinely believed it. They could really believe that. And it's interesting about, again, I mean, we were raised in something and genuinely believed it. And so people can come to believe things. And I think there's different motivators for different people, especially depending on where they're at in life. For someone like you who's born and raised in it, it can boil down to this is what I know. It can be as simple as that. For someone who comes into it later, like you said, there can be other motivators, and one can be, I'm seen, I have value, I have this new worth, I'm special, I'm now set apart. Like I'm one of the few, so that can really feed our pride, our self-esteem, our self-worth, arrogance. We saw a lot of arrogance.
Self-righteousness.
And yes, absolutely. And I think there was another motivator, if you're open to speaking about that, with the dynamic between men and women or men and girls who are coming of age. That definitely played in as a motivator too for certain people.
For men and women, because the men, yes, there were men that came for that specifically, and there were women that came for that specifically. So, yeah.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about, for someone who maybe is listening to this for the first time, let's say they haven't heard my story, they haven't seen my story videos, I'll link it in the description of this podcast episode for people to give them more context if they want. But let's say this is their first exposure to Naomi Wright Ministries. Do you mind giving some context as to what that dynamic was? Because, for example, they may not know that it was a polygamous group. So if we start there, this was a polygamous group. And what was that like for the men and the women?
So, okay. How they were able to work it into scripture was they used, Old Testament. So, David, Solomon. They also used prophets of the Old Testament. So certain prophets did certain things that were strange, odd, and it was a representation to the people from God. So they would act out certain things to represent what God was trying to do with his people, say to his people. God, having a many-membered bride, the prophet, Philip at this point, was acting that out by taking many women. And so that's how, you question, how did my parents, how were they okay with this? They didn't come from this. I know at one point they had to question it. I mean, at one point, men were swapping wives. So how did they rationalize that?
And it didn't end with the prophet.
No.
Which is interesting because he was acting it out, but then others were able to join in that practice as well.
They were. And then at one point, my father even tried to do it because the men thought it was their responsibility at this point. And my dad really had trouble with it because he struggled with it. He felt he had to take on another wife. And I remember certain women coming around. And as a child, I mean, that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I remember storming into my parents' room after we had a cookout, and there was a certain woman. She came for that very reason, and she was flaunting herself, throwing herself at my dad. And I go in there and I say, what is your intentions with this woman? You know, my mom was very quiet. She was very quiet about it, you know, because she was to be submissive to this, if this was God's will. And I don't think those were my dad's intentions. And then it came out later that, okay, it wasn't for everyone. It was just the prophet's responsibility. It's okay to take a second wife. And it was a relief to my dad. And so, you know, I didn't have to live that.
There was this component of, which goes back to Old Testament as well. There are Old Testament examples and in the law and things that speak to if there's a young widow, you know, it's best for her to be remarried, or if, you know, your brother dies, like taking his wife. And so there was this aspect to polygamy within our group that included that. Well, this woman is new to the message and, you know, she's widowed or her husband's left her and she has a child. And so we'll take her as a second wife and care for her. And so they were living this out. It wasn't all that, of course, but that was one way in which polygamy did present.
Later on then, as an adult, I don't know if this was new revelation. I was informed that women did not have representation except for through their husband. And you know, I questioned that immediately. Like, what do you mean?
Can you define that for me? Like representation.
Like the man was the mediator for the woman.
To other people
God.
Or to God?
To God. So, and I immediately like, oh, can I have a personal relationship with God? What do you mean? I have to marry a believer for God to see me, for me to be represented as bride, as part of the bride. So that was a hard one.
And then how did this aspect of the group, the polygamous aspect, how did that play into the young women like yourself as you came of age, as you approached 17, 18 years old? And the reason I'm asking you to speak to this is because I've been asked about this a couple of times. And I have shared my side. And my side had some interesting differences being the daughter of the quote-unquote prophet himself. And so there's a dynamic that I haven't overly spoken to because I've really tried to stick to my experience and my story. So if you're open to sharing that, I would love for you to generally share what that dynamic was.
As young girls, you know, the older men, it was ew, you know, we knew to stay clear of that fella and don't go. Well, not so much that, but just like we knew their intentions. Like it was predatorial. I mean, it was like we were to be preyed upon. It felt that way. I never really had too many instances, and I don't know if I should speak for those who do or just I watched as men would groom these young girls. And again, it stems back to like classes or, you know, they were just preying upon them, gifting them with things, lavishing them with attention, you know, and they came from families that maybe they didn't get that. And especially being a woman in the message, you know, the boys, it seemed, got to do all the fun things, be in the sports. You know, we couldn't attend sports because you had to wear shorts, you know, or not attend sports, but play sports. And they would give them what they were yearning for. And and their families would almost push it on him because it was usually the wealthier men, and they had the pick, right? And the families of the young woman were excited, like, we're going to be part of this family, and he's going to take care of us, right?
So much of just sounds very old school. So some of this isn't unheard of. And I think back to, gosh, whatever Little Woman days would be, or where, not that book specifically, but, you know, that time period in history where the woman marries wealthy and it is seen as a good thing, or the marriage is set up, it's arranged.
Yeah, they don't necessarily
because
have to love each other.
Right. But this was interesting because the girls did get to choose. They did say yes or no, but it's difficult to say it was a full open choice when, one, you're groomed for it, starting likely before the statute age. Like, they're already getting ready. Like, someone's already picked you out and has their eye on you. They're kind of just waiting for you to be old enough. You've been deprived of some basic human needs, and such as that love and affection and attention and those sorts of good things that people should have, those aspects of unconditional love and support from people in their lives. And the family is seeing it as such a good thing. So all of this can be, like I said, you could look at other time frames in history where this stuff happened. But here's the really messed up part. Here's the real twist. It was God's will. You were marrying a man of God who either was the prophet himself or was very close to the prophet. And so this like proximity situation. And it was God's will for you to, how could you not want to be with this man? What is your issue with God? And so it spoke to people's view of God and their relationship with God. It would be questioned. Would you agree with that?
I do. Yeah. I see that.
And that's the real coercion part. That's the real manipulative part. Because a woman could decide, I'm going to go along with this marriage because I do see he's a good man. Maybe I don't love him. Maybe I'm not attracted to him, but he's a good man. He's kind to me. He'll provide well. He'll help take care of my family. A woman could make that choice for herself.
Right.
But you add this religious piece and you throw God into it, and all of a sudden it's manipulation. While you were active in the group, how would you describe your view of God?
From very early on, I had a personal relationship with God. So, you know, in my bed at night, I was talking to him. I talked to him, you know, throughout the day. So I felt I had a personal relationship with him. But if you're asking if I was fearful, like he was vengeful, I didn't feel that till maybe later on in life when when fear was pushed, I feel like. So things would be said like, this person denied the message and they now have cancer and are dying from this. And then you're like, whoa, I mean, yeah, is he, you know? So I would speak to him and talk to him, and he knew my heart, and he knew I wanted truth, and is this the truth, you know? But you know, I never really saw him as vengeful, and that's why I could differentiate that they were pushing fear through those instances where they would tell these stories, and Branham, gosh, all his stories were of a vengeful God. You know, you deny this, you drop dead. Right there, you dropped dead right in front of me, right? Yeah, I saw him as a father figure, you know. I thought I knew him. I didn't know Jesus. You know, I knew God, and then at some point he goes, okay, let me introduce you, you know. Let me introduce you to my son. Because Branham was that Christ figure.
God wasn't so much messed up for you as Jesus was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And it's a gift. That was a gift given, for sure. He protected me from that. Because when, I was stepping away from this, you distrust everything then, and he is the only, I thought, well, there's only one thing, and that's my creator. So I'm just going to hold on to that. Just going to hold on to that. And you're going to have to show me truth. You're going to have to move me through this muck, because, I just feel like I'm drowning. I'm just drowning. So yeah, he extended that hand and pulled me up through.
He says that he will do that, and he has followed through.
Mm-hmm.
He means it. For anyone who's listening who may wonder where he is, if you ask to see him and to meet him, you will find him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Even in a mess like this.
Gosh.
It's amazing.
Yeah, seriously.
What was the catalyst for your exit? How did that come to be?
So we moved an inconvenient distance from the believers, right?
Convenient.
Yeah. And so, we were spending less time. And the funny thing is we actually moved off grid. So I didn't have a lot of electronics, right? Like we didn't have TV at this point. We didn't have computers and things. We were going through a period. And I started reading my Bible. Started reading the Bible, and was coming across different scriptures that brought question about certain things. One was, I'm not going to be able to quote it, but I think it's in 2 Corinthians, and it talks about the that Satan can masquerade as an angel of light. I'm like, what? I mean, So then, whenever you went with a question to a believer, in my specific case, I was always told, Elizabeth, be careful. Don't question the prophet. That ended it. I mean, I never was able to satisfy that my question or get it answered. And then I read that God gives you permission to test a prophet. You have permission, right? Actually, it's a responsibility.
It's stronger than permission.
Exactly. And so I was reading this, and then where we were living, there was a neighbor, and just so happened to be Jehovah's Witness. So she came up with her tracts one day, and she's trying to prove her religion is the truth. And I'm like, I'm going to prove mine's the truth, So I start researching. I'm going to come to her with all this, proof. And so I went to a website that was originally pro-Branham initially. And, I was going to do all my research on this website. The first thing that pops up is this apology letter. What are they saying? What are these discrepancies they're saying? What's happening? And, we were kept from questioning. So it was a blind faith. And now we're in the age of information. So you just Google it, I mean, we were told certain things, like a certain picture was in the museum of, do you remember what it's
I can't remember which museum, but yes, are you talking about the cloud image?
Yes. Not only the clouded image, but William Branham's picture with the light above his head. Oh, the only supernatural picture taken. And that this was hanging in the Museum of Supernatural
something.
So, I can't remember.
It was just hanging in everyone's living rooms.
Right. It was. Everybody had it in their living room. And so the one thing I saw is that no such thing existed. Yeah. And what? So I just went down the rabbit hole, started reading all of this, where they were finding all these discrepancies with his prophecies. And at this point, I mean, my husband is deep into it too, and he's actually talking to someone at work about this and trying to recruit, I guess. I don't know, And so now I have to go to my husband and tell him what I'm seeing, and so this this fear comes over me, like I'm that spirit of Eve, right? I'm the deceiver. I mean, I'm coming into the camp and just bringing deception and confusion. I just said, here it is, read this and tell me what you think. It's a cult. Like, what? No.
That was his response?
That was his response. And I couldn't accept that. I couldn't call it a cult at that time, but he was done with it. Mm-hmm. So he had to go to the fellow at work, apologize to him, and say, look, this is what we're seeing. And then I have to talk to my parents, right? So they came for a visit. I hadn't mentioned anything before. They just had asked to come visit. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be the time. And I shared it with them, and they left in shock.
Because you were all in.
Absolutely. We were the golden children. I mean, we did everything right.
Raising their grandchildren in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I don't know if you want to go beyond that, but talk about when they...
I'm just curious. What happened with the woman who's Jehovah's Witness? Did the two of you have an interaction? Because wasn't this it was a nice relationship, right? It wasn't, I'm going to prove you wrong. You may have felt that,
yeah.
It was...
No, I showed her some things. Gosh, it's been a while ago, and I don't know if I can. So they don't believe, what don't they? Something about the spirit. But I think it was John, where he talks about
the indwelling
spirit. Yeah, I don't think they believe that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I shared that with her. And boy, she turned on me. She turned on me in an instant. She had her peoples up there at my door knocking. Yeah. And then she would not talk to me. She accused me of certain things, my children of certain things then. I mean, like, within a day.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it never got to the point of you going to her and saying, I'm mistaken.
No, it was just for me. Mm-hmm. God did this just for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brought that woman into my life just for that, that moment.
See, he gave you that fighter spirit and he used it. Have you had any contact with any of the leadership of the group? I would say the top men, the elders, since you've exited. I'm going to ask you about your family separately.
Mm-hmm. No real interaction. Like if they come asking me, why or anything. Okay, so my father would be considered one, but beyond him, no one came to Adam and I asking what, like in a loving spirit, just what are you seeing? What are you having problems with? And they wouldn't allow us to share in any of the things that we were seeing, or, I've already seen that. No, I don't need to read that, So no, not really. The only one would be my father. And at some point he did then confront us, but not in a loving way.
Was that soon after you had?
Yeah, it was with it was in the first week of us telling them.
Did that shake you and make you consider reconsidering?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Your eyes were too open.
Yeah, they were. I from a child, I was having conversations with God, and I trusted him. I trusted him over my father, over any of the leadership. And I said, if this is truth, you'll lead me back to it. I have no doubt about that. Right now, you're showing me that it's not. Yep.
That's powerful. What losses have you taken? What personal losses have you taken by leaving the group?
Strained relationship with my mother and father and the family members that are still in the message. We try. Very strained, though. See, none of my siblings are in the message. So I have support through them. And, we make it work. But we know there's still that divide between us.
And it's a very serious divide in a group like this, because the view isn't as simple as... I think I've made this comment jokingly over the past few days. someone who is an atheist has more hope than someone like you or I. And that's because an atheist in the group's mind maybe hasn't decided. They can still choose this group's belief. But someone like myself, who has known it but has decided against it, that's likened to the mark of the devil. Like, I have sided with Satan, and now there is not just well, we can't be involved with her because we don't agree with her anymore. There's also this, we have to shield and guard from her because she's of the enemy. And so we need to protect ourselves from her. Now, that's the experience I've had.
No, I feel that. My mother's very guarded. Yeah. You know, I've had a relationship with all of these people in the message. They were like family. I love them. I do. And today, she doesn't even mention their names to me. She doesn't mention them by name. She'll just say, my friends. Oh, I'm going to my friend's house. Oh, I'm going to, do this with my friends. And you can tell me who you're going with, Mom. I'm not, I can't, I don't understand that. Is she protecting them from me? I don't know. I don't know if she thinks that I'm going to use information against her or the group. I think this is scaring them.
And what do you mean by this?
This moment here, this interview, their children have turned against them.
And again, that is, of course, the perception. It's not the truth.
No,
you love your parents.
I see them as victims.
Yeah, you would welcome them in a second.
Absolutely.
And the change from the start of this conversation to now, I just want to highlight that. We started with this incredible sense of community and all of these cookouts and this group of friends and these people that understood life in a way that others didn't, and understood our life, your life, in a way that others didn't. And you said it was great in so many ways, and there's a fondness for it. And now, what I'm hearing from you is I've lost all of that. And
I see what you're asking.
And this is a huge fallout from someone stepping away. And you're not the only one who has felt it. People who take that hard stand and they truly follow the real Christ, he says, follow me, and they really do that, they do suffer losses. And the promise that we have is that what we gain is better. And we know
Absolutely.
that, and we have so much hope. But that doesn't minimize or negate the true pain that we can suffer now.
You're right. Yes, losing that community was very hard. And it's been hard to find that. Okay, so do we go to church? I have issues with trust. Do my husband and I study together? Is that enough? Is that enough, Lord? Do we need to be in church? I don't know if that's where you're at. And so we just started individually, our own time studying together, then just within our surrounding community. So, we've collected friends here and there, and they're they're believing Christians, and it's not like it was, though. In that group, you have a common goal, a common belief. You're all on one page, and you make a point to see each other very often. You're with each other quite a bit. I mean, several times a week, you're with these people. And so, yeah, I find it hard to build relationships like I had at one time. Very distrusting. You know, we've tried to go to church. We've gone to a mega church. We brought our Bibles, and I felt foolish when we walked in because we were the only ones carrying our Bibles. And I'm like, they don't study out of the Bible? Like, what is this? It's just a rock concert pretty much, you know? And then, you know, there were some other churches that we've tried to go to, and I don't know. I don't know why. Do I have to force it until it feels right?
I think the question you just asked is the question I will answer in full in the follow-up episode that I create to our conversation. So all I'd want to say now is that it's good to know what our boundary is, where we're comfortable, and try to push a little past that when we're trying to challenge and maybe grow or check something out. But it's not typically healthy for someone to just blow past that and just shove themselves into the deep end. And so that's how I'd like to answer that for now. I know that I've been taught that in education. I still did it anyway, and it did not go well. It was very unsafe for me, and it threw me into some pretty hardcore dissociative episodes that would last for days, where I just was not even really connected to my body, because it was a very innate trauma response for me. And so I had to seek help for that, to just really ground myself back into my body. So I would kind of float out of my body in church and be hanging out like in the corner of like I could see myself, and I would be so anxious. It's like I could imagine myself running down the street and like ripping my skin off. Like I could not be in a church building. That's not healthy to push to that degree. But it was healthy to listen to a live stream. So there were steps that I could take. And I also had an incredible support person at the time, a professional counselor, who didn't have a background in cults specifically or cult-related trauma, but had some great trauma background in general. And so what he was able to transcribe kind of from what he knew to what I was going through was really helpful. And I learned how to back away and recognize those signs that I was heading into the point of no return, or like, ooh, I went too far and now I'm really reacting. I learned how to read those signs internally and know, okay, like take a step back, like I need to be gentle. This is too much right now. And then over time be able to proceed. But it was a process. And I would never recommend to someone that they push themselves like that. It's incredibly unhealthy, and it doesn't help with trust issues. We at least have to be able to trust God and ourselves. And I need to be able to trust myself not to hurt myself.
That is, yeah.
Do you anticipate any fallout from this conversation?
I do.
If it's found.
Yeah, if it's found. But I'm hoping it sparks conversation. You know, I do. I just want discussion over this. I want to share, you know, the discrepancies that were found with this, and hope that they can see that this is a false religion, that they're following a false prophet. That's my hope.
Absolutely. And I hear too much sensationalism around groups such as the one we've come out of. And it amazes people. People find it very intriguing and interesting. And I can understand that. I can get that. If you have no framework for this, it can be like, what? And how? And all of these questions. So I understand it. But what people can forget and lose track of is these are real people made in the image of God who are loved by someone. They are someone's child, maybe someone's parent, someone's brother, sister. These are real people and these are real lives, and they are a part of the next generation. Who is a part of the next generation? And so if we don't speak to this now, how many more generations continue? I at least need to know that I tried. And it's not, oh, I just tried because I should. No, these people have faces. They have names. They have stories and hearts and souls that are in jeopardy.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's not something to sensationalize. So thank you for speaking to that. Have you found anything positive from this experience as you've had more space between your exit and now?
Well, yeah, I mean, God has led me to truth, right? It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. You're building your foundation on a false belief. And I needed a severe humbling. And he came in, he tore it down. I'm no longer bride, all these promises that were offered through the message that I believed, I had to let go of. They were comfort. They were, that cozy blanket that I protected myself in. And boy, he annihilated it, right? And then slowly started building my foundation again. But it was a severe humbling. Boy, but I needed it. I needed it because I thought I was special. I thought I had it figured out. I was the true bride of Christ. And, it's a very small Noah group. And I'm going to walk right into eternity. The millennium's right there for me. And I wanted that. I was promised that. Yeah. He knocked that out from underneath me and started building up my faith. Well, the main thing is like I said, he introduced me to his son, Jesus. I didn't know Jesus. They separate the man from the Christ. So, and we, Branham was our Christ. We fell asleep to his life story. We enjoyed activities in his coloring books. We knew all his prophecies. And, it is. It's like a mourning. It's like a death. I mean, someone has died, and I loved this prophet, this man, and even part of me loved the prophet, your father, So yeah, it took some time to grieve. But God was there every step of the way, reassuring me, helping me get through that grief. And I'm so thankful I had support through my husband and through some siblings.
And now through the truth of who Christ is and him choosing to come to earth, both fully divine and fully human, and suffering and being persecuted and dying on a cross for us, we do then have the opportunity to choose him, repent for our sins, be forgiven, and be a part of the bride for real. And our prayer now is just that the bride is billions of people.
Right. Yeah.
And not 100.
Not a remnant. Yeah. Small remnant of folks.
Right. And so with Jesus, there is truth. that we can actually stand on for some of what we had been told before that was used incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
How has this history shaped you as a mother?
I just keep an honest, open dialogue with my children. They got, at very early age, I was teaching them about William Branham, and then, stopped, and then just started strictly Bible then. And I'm just relieved. I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved that I didn't indoctrinate them, through their life, and now they're going through something like this, and, I'm the parents that are still in the message and they're finding truth. But yeah, no, it's a relief.
Have you thought about how incredible it is? Because do you know what generation raised in a mix of the William Branham Message Church, but then my dad's version of that, the splinter group that he created? Were you third generation?
It might even be fourth. My great-grandmother was part of a Branham church.
Okay. Have you ever stopped and thought about how incredible that is?
Yeah.
That God in his mercy, through you, broke that lineage line?
Yes.
How cool is that?
Right.
4 generations.
Yeah. I mean, when you put it like that, that's
an incredible blessing
really
that
is.
you have been willing to give to your children.
Thank you.
If you were to issue them one warning as they get older and they step out on their own so that they never find themselves in a similar situation, what red flag would you want them to be aware of? If you were to say, boys, watch out for this. And if you see this, run.
Anyone who's claiming that they have the truth, if they're not allowing for open discussion and questioning it, and they get upset, I always want them to question. Never take anything blindly. Never go into anything blindly. Research it. Somebody's telling you that they have the truth, that this is the way, that you have the responsibility to test anyone that's claiming that they have the one and only truth.
Thank you for listening to this production of Naomi Wright Ministries. You can learn more about us by visiting naomiwrightministries.com. Please note that any opinions represented by this ministry are not to be mistaken as medical or professional counseling advice or services. Employees, volunteers, representatives, guests of Naomi Wright Ministries may be individually trained, authorized, or licensed to provide professional counseling, psychological treatment, or psychological diagnoses. What you are listening to or viewing is not the provision of any such services. None of the interviews represented here creates a counselor-counselee relationship.